French Connection, The Conversation. Superman Gene Hackman has died at the age of 95.
On February 26, 2025, a routine visit to a gated property in Santa Fe, New Mexico turned into one of the most talked about mysteries in Hollywood history. A maintenance worker arrived to do simple upkeep and instead found something that would soon dominate headlines around the world. Inside that home were the bodies of two-time Academy Award winner Gene Hackman and his wife, classical pianist Betsy Arakawa. What followed was weeks of speculation, conflicting theories, and a nation wondering how one of cinema's most respected actors could vanish from the world without anyone noticing. This is the full story of what really happened inside that house, and what the final investigation revealed. When the worker reached the property that morning, the front door was reportedly unlocked. Nothing seemed immediately wrong until they stepped further inside. Deputies were called, and what they found painted a haunting picture. Hackman was discovered in a mudroom near the back of the house, not far from a cane and a pair of sunglasses, as though he had simply been walking through his own home. Arakawa was found in a bathroom on the opposite side of the house, near a scattering of prescription pills and a space heater that had tipped onto the floor. The couple had 3 dogs. 2 were found alive, wandering the property. A third was found dead inside a closed kennel. The condition of the bodies immediately told investigators something unusual. This was not a case of 2 people who had died hours earlier. The level of decomposition suggested Hackman and Arakawa had already been gone for a significant stretch of time before anyone realized it. For investigators, that detail was the most unsettling part of the entire case. A public figure as recognizable as Gene Hackman, and a devoted wife who rarely left his side, had apparently been deceased inside their own home for days without anyone checking in. In the first hours after the bodies were found, authorities were cautious. There was no forced entry, no signs of a struggle, and no visible injuries on either body. That absence of violence ruled out an obvious crime scene, but it also left a frustrating vacuum where a clear explanation should have been. The earliest and most widely repeated theory was carbon monoxide poisoning. It made a certain kind of sense. A silent, odorless gas could explain 2 people falling ill without warning, in separate rooms, without a struggle. Fire officials and technicians from the local gas utility were brought in almost immediately to inspect every line and appliance in the home. They found nothing. No leak, no faulty appliance, no elevated readings anywhere on the property. That theory, at least in its original form, was effectively closed within the investigation's first days, even though it continued to circulate publicly for weeks afterward as commentators searched for an explanation. Other theories followed just as quickly. Some speculated about a murder-suicide, though investigators noted that such cases typically leave behind notes, stage surroundings, or other unmistakable signs, none of which were present here. Others wondered about a shared decision between husband and wife, but the fact that they were found in separate rooms made that explanation harder to support as well. For a period, the case seemed to defy a tidy answer, and the uncertainty is exactly what pulled so much public attention toward it. Investigators leaned on an unlikely piece of evidence to begin reconstructing what had happened: Gene Hackman's pacemaker. The device had recorded his heart's activity right up until it stopped, giving authorities an approximate date of death, around February 17th or 18th. That was a critical clue, because it meant Hackman had likely died roughly a week after his wife. Digital records added more to the picture. Phone activity showed that in her final days, Betsy Arakawa had been searching for information about flu-like symptoms and breathing difficulties, and had made calls related to those same concerns. It suggested she had been feeling unwell and trying to understand why, without realizing how serious her condition had become. That detail changed the entire framing of the case. Rather than a single catastrophic event that struck the couple at the same moment, investigators began to suspect 2 separate medical emergencies, occurring roughly a week apart, in a home where Hackman, in his mid-90s and in declining health, may not have fully understood that his wife had died. Months after the initial discovery, New Mexico's Office of the Medical Investigator released the findings that finally closed the case. Betsy Arakawa, who was 65, had died of hantavirus pulmonary syndrome, a rare but serious illness contracted from exposure to rodent droppings. Officials noted that several structures on the property were accessible to rodents, which lined up with how the infection likely began. Her death was ruled natural, and investigators estimated it occurred around February 11th. Gene Hackman's cause of death was determined to be hypertensive and atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. In simpler terms, long-standing heart disease, with advanced Alzheimer's disease listed as a significant contributing factor. His toxicology results also showed signs consistent with prolonged fasting, suggesting he had gone a long stretch without eating properly in his final days. Investigators believe he was alone in the house, in advanced cognitive decline, for roughly a week after his wife's death, without the capacity to recognize what had happened or to call for help. It was, in the end, not a mystery involving foul play, hidden secrets, or a decision either of them made. It was a quiet, devastating sequence of two natural deaths, separated by time, inside a home where no one else was checking in. Long before that house in Santa Fe became the center of a national story, Gene Hackman was simply one of the most respected actors of his generation. He trained at the Pasadena Playhouse, where classmates reportedly voted him among the least likely to succeed. He pushed forward anyway, working small theater roles for years before his breakout in Bonnie and Clyde earned him his first Oscar nomination. From there, his career only grew. His performance as Popeye Doyle in The French Connection won him the Academy Award for Best Actor and helped redefine the modern crime thriller. He went on to work with Francis Ford Coppola in The Conversation, played opposite Al Pacino in Scarecrow, and brought a mix of menace and comedy to Lex Luthor in the Superman films. Later generations knew him for The Royal Tenenbaums and for a second Oscar win in Unforgiven, where he worked alongside Clint Eastwood. Eastwood, who directed him in that film, later said that no actor brought more honesty to a role than Hackman did, and that he had lost not just a collaborator but a close friend. Actress Gwyneth Paltrow, who starred alongside him in The Royal Tenenbaums, shared a tribute of her own following his passing. Hackman stepped away from acting in 2004, citing the toll that filmmaking stress was taking on his heart. He had already survived a heart procedure in 1990 after suffering chest pain during a trip, and doctors later told him his heart could no longer handle the pressures of a film set. In retirement, he moved fully into life in New Mexico, spending his days painting, fishing, and co-writing historical novels, largely out of the public eye alongside Betsy. In the aftermath, Hackman's daughters Elizabeth and Leslie, along with his granddaughter Annie, released a statement describing the loss as one that left an emptiness nothing could fill. Leslie later spoke about her father's health in his final years, describing him as still remarkably fit for his age and physically active through yoga and Pilates, while also crediting Betsy with quietly keeping him going for as long as she did. That devotion is, in many ways, the most human part of this story. Betsy Arakawa wasn't just Gene Hackman's wife. By all accounts, she had become his primary caretaker as his health and memory declined. Her death didn't just end her own life. It left her husband, in the advanced stages of Alzheimer's, alone in a house with no one to notice that anything was wrong. What started as a story full of dark speculation, poisoned air, hidden secrets, even the suggestion of foul play, ended up being something far sadder and far more ordinary. Two people who had shared a life together for over 3 decades died separately, of natural causes, inside the home they loved, without anyone realizing it in time. Gene Hackman spent his career bringing complicated, flawed, deeply human characters to life on screen. In the end, his own story turned out to be a deeply human one too, not a scandal, not a mystery to be solved, but a portrait of aging, illness, and the quiet vulnerability that can exist even behind the walls of a Hollywood legend's home. What do you think this story reveals about aging in the public eye, and the people who quietly hold everything together behind the scenes? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this one.